This is Sybert signing in to Tib Wars on the map Coastline something as we jump into the finals of the July 1v1 random-only tournament from, of course, GameReplays.org. But in the top position, we do indeed have the green nod player advancing in a spoiler 3-0 score from the semifinals. This is Luvaskot. While in the bottom right-hand corner, we do indeed have the pink GDI. This is Shock Treatment. Advancing 3-1 from the semifinals to make it into the finals. Shock Treatment, a player with a bit more pedigree, a player who is probably the favorite heading into this tournament to take this thing. He's the guy who's been to probably more finals than I think anyone else in this tournament. I don't know about more finals than anyone else in Tib Wars, but he certainly is one of the best players in the last couple of years, 3 or so. Certainly had a lot of good showings at events, and generally puts up good games, so I'm always happy to see him in a tournament. Always happy to be able to cast his games. Moving his MCV, of course, and both of these guys going for pretty much early expand-oriented builds. I guess different placement of their outpost slash surveyor, or I guess it was like surveyor emissary, as they're going to be going for those. And of course, this map, not played nearly as much, I feel, as the other competitive 1v1 maps, but a couple of Tib spikes there. War Factory going down on the front lines for Shock Treatment. He moved his MCV kind of halfway, like he kind of split the difference between his main base and the expansions. But he is indeed going to be going for the northern expansion, which is going to put him in an interesting position towards his opponent. He's going to have those very quick reinforcements. First Pitbull going to be coming on out. Buggy will go for the scout for Luvaskot. He will know what's up. And Shock Treatment may not actually realize that the base is down in the south. Not actually sure where that Pitbull went. Oh, it's kind of sweeping down south. He's not close enough to actually see that refinery. He may actually see this harvester transferring down and kind of get an idea that there is indeed something going on down there. And yep, he's like, oh, okay, so you expanded on down south. That's where you're going to be open and weak. Potentially, there could be an airfield here. This kind of lake area is a nice angle of attack to come in with orcas or other aircraft. Definitely some nice, terrain, for lack of a better word, to use and to fly your aircraft over. First couple of harvesters out on this expansion field for Shock Treatment, and then he's soon going to have some eco rolling on this field as well. Engineer popping out of that racks. Of course, he wants to grab hold of this Tib spike if at all possible. And these guys both, once again, focusing on economy. This is very much what we saw on Pipeline Problems. I feel like both of the games in the semifinals were very eco-focused for that first game. The players potentially just wanting to open up with nice macro games to see, who ends up being a little bit better in a big army sort of scenario. As sometimes, if you go for an early aggressive opening, sometimes we do see players all in hard enough to actually kill off the other guy in the first couple of minutes. I feel like Tib Wars tends to make it more towards that, like, big Scorpion tank versus big Pred tank army, that kind of mid-game pretty quickly. Of course, that happens very quickly, as macroing up the armies and getting your economy rolling is not very difficult. Tier 2 is now up for Luvaskot, or rather it has been for a little while. I'm actually curious if Shock Treatment is going to be going for any sort of aircraft-based builds. Finally grabs that Tib spike. It's quite a ways into this game for the first Tib spike to be grabbed. Pitbulls now out on the field, going to be taking a bit of damage from those rocket troopers. They're going in for the scout. We'll be able to see a couple of harvesters, but really 2 Pitbulls, you don't expect that to do a huge amount of damage. Tier 3 now up for Luvaskot. And wow, those pit bulls, they are absolutely hiding in that corner about as far back as they can go, is how far they want to be away from those units. Scorpion tanks making their way across the map, pulling back quite a few Predator tanks as just 2 of them end up getting split off to help deal with the Scorpion tanks. This Harvester going to be forced to turn around. The remainder of the Predator tanks going to be getting sent back to the front line so that there's no major weakness for shock treatment. Going to be doing a bit of long-distance harvesting, and those rocket troopers cleaning up those pit bulls, I guess, since really leaving those pit bulls there, no real reason to do that. Pred tanks, still not dealing with these Scorpion tanks. Tier 2 and Tier 3 getting placed down by shock treatment as well, so both of these players going to be potentially up to those artillery wars. Racks on the front line as well, and I'm assuming that's an Orca strike going to be coming in. I'm not actually sure if that's a very wise move. Sells off his Tier 3. Oh no, that was actually, I guess it makes sense that the green beacon was indeed from the green player, as in comes the Tib Vapor Bomb, absolutely shutting down the Tier 2 and the Tier 3. Pred tanks getting eliminated by these last, or Scorpion tanks getting eliminated by these last couple of Pred tanks. And unfortunately for shock treatment, he's losing that tech. He's going to be sent back a little bit, and Tib Catalyst Missile firing off somewhere. I thought for sure that I ended up hearing that. I'm not, maybe I'm tripping and I didn't actually hear that, or it was something else. But in this particular case, not actually doing anything. Buildings garrisoned up aren't quite enough to stop shock treatment. He does have an overwhelming number of forces right here onto the front lines. Luvaskot is not going to be able to deal with that just yet. And Luvaskot double MCV. Not a lot of production, though. 2 avatars. I mean, one war factory, that's not actually that impressive. There's a second war factory. He could probably even go for a 3rd war factory and still be able to produce units pretty consistently. Going for obelisks is also a pretty good choice for the defense, and he's going to need a couple more on the way if he wants to hold off these Predator tanks, as they are going to be getting dropped down, I'm assuming, in the path of these Predator tanks. There's one. There's a second one to greet these Predator tanks. Hello, how are you? I hope you're doing fine, but we do want to kill you pretty much every one at a time. And they almost one-shot the Pred tanks. Not quite enough DPS to finish them off. Luvaskot pulling out stealth tanks as well, sniping down Harvester after Harvester, but he's now being hunted very well by those pit bulls. Garrisonable structure getting cleared by the Grenadiers as the infantry swarm moving forward. And I'm not actually sure if these 2 obelisks will be enough on their own to deal with this infantry. However, of course, a couple of more obelisks or some avatars on the front line would help Luvaskot hold that ground. Last couple of stealth tanks getting killed off. Those pit bulls all crushing through the attacking force. Shredder turrets now on the front lines, but a couple more reinforcing rocket squads have shown up. And Luvaskot starting to make some headway, starting to push back shock treatment away from his base. The slow, steady push of that Tier 3 Nod Army going to be potentially crushing in on shock treatment. Rocket Troopers getting some pretty nice DPS against some of those avatars as they turn their rear armor to them, and now with sonic emitters, juggernauts, and more Predator tanks pushing to the front line, this may turn into the slaughtering ground for the forces of Luvaskot. A nice stealth field going down there, eliminating a fair number of missile squads as they pretty much do all get cleaned up. Sonic emitter blasts clearing the way for some of those base defenses. Some of those the Shredder turret just getting absolutely crushed there. Not quite shredded, but absolutely crushed by that sonic emitter. More operation centers, potentially just for the build radius, potentially also for the Black Hand squads, just to get that extra building destruction on the front lines. And of course, being able to flame down those sonic emitters is quite useful, as the Avatar's going to be making a bit of headway. Railgun's definitely a good investment for shock treatment, as he's may be able to hold the line with the solid DPS from the Juggernauts wearing away at these Avatars. Just a couple of avatars left that actually have any reasonable amount of HP. One of them is just about sneezing, and there he dies right there as someone gave him a bit of a cold, and even though he's a mechanized robot, it was enough to just kill him off. The forces have basically evaporated. The pit bulls in the south going to start working away at these harvesters, cleaning up them one by one. And Luvaskot does not have the forces to split between the front lines and his own economy, as on his third base, it's starting to get cleaned up. Harvester after harvester going down to the fire of those pit bulls, and the missiles impacting, ever more devastating by the fact that these are really the most active harvesters for Luvaskot. These are the guys that are actually pulling their weight in terms of fueling his economy, in terms of fueling his production, and these are the most important harvesters that are most importantly getting killed. Shock treatment able to, in the last couple of minutes, really crush through Luvaskot and make that happen, as training account is going to need to upgrade a little bit here for Luvaskot before being able to easily kill off shock treatment. Luvaskot putting up a good fight, but in the end, it was not enough to deal with shock treatment. Of course, it's the best of 7. It's not over. There is still more to come. Can shock treatment continue his winning streak, or will Luvaskot turn it around? Let's find out in game number 2, which takes us to Tournament Rift. And spawning on the left side, once again as the nod, this time as blue, this is Luvaskot. And on the right side, the pink GDI. Can he mount another assault like he did in the last game? This is shock treatment. If he's able to pull off something quite like the last game, he will be a happy boy indeed. But it's a different map. Luvaskot has still got the opportunity to make it work. He has got the opportunity to mount the comeback. A couple of militant squads spread out across the map. If this was Kane's Wrath, there probably would have been a shadow team opening or something like that. But 2 rifleman squads in the south should be able to snipe this engineer. There's only 1 militant squad. There would have to be something crazy for this 1 militant squad to kill both of these rifleman squads. So this engineer is probably dead. If this engineer survives, I don't even know. There we go. He got killed. For a second, I was like, am I really going to have to eat my words about this rifleman squad not killing that engineer? That would be absolutely ridiculous. Buggy going to be coming out from Luvaskot, going for that scout basically immediately because that's what he wants. 2 APC engineers, 3 APC engineers. Of course, there's 2 spikes in the south to be secured. And of course, that first spike initially already captured. Bikes going to be coming in. We'll be targeting down this APC. Early bikes from Luvaskot going to be able to snipe down. And they will be able to... Wow. They were not able to snipe down that APC before the engineer actually evacuated on out of there. And goodbye APC, but the engineer is safely inside of that foxhole. And of course, he could come out at a later time to play. He could show up in a couple of moments or get picked up by another APC and continue on his journey, continue on his path towards whatever the heck he's doing. 3 refineries up and running. A couple of early bikes following up with some eco play from Luvaskot. Shock treatment instead going to be going for a bit of a faster expand. As you can see, Luvaskot... Oh, is he dropping another war factory? I'm actually curious as to what he's constructing. There's the war factory. He's not going to go all in, is he? Triple war factory on that main field and then all inning after that? That would be quite the thing. He's not going to do that. Okay, good. There we go. There's the pack up of the MCV. I was worried he was about to go super aggro mode. I mean, obviously he opened up relatively aggressive, but you don't need to do anything too silly. Let's be honest here. Come on, guys. Nothing too silly. Bike Buggy is going to be the unit composition pumping out from Luvaskot. Double War Factory Bike Buggy does give you pretty good production, and as long as you're able to stay active, find those open angles of attack, then you will be able to do some good damage. Of course, the advantage of the Bike Buggy is it's very mobile, very fast. You're able to swing around, hit multiple places at once if you can, and then hopefully your opponent isn't quite able to deal with it. APC engineer getting shut down, completely destroyed, and that was probably the engineer from that foxhole. But of course, this gives Shock Treatment a little bit of warning that there's incoming bike buggy for him to deal with. The crane gets sniped extremely quickly. A couple of volleys there, going to be trading out for 3 attack bikes, but still, a little bit more utility in the crane itself than the 3 attack bikes, so probably still a worth it trade for Luvaskot. Doesn't want to have too many more inefficient, cost-inefficient trades throughout the rest of this game, though, of course, not a little bit weaker units in general than GDI. Still has to be very careful about those engagements. Lots of pit bulls out on the field for Shock Treatment. He's moving in for the first big attack. I think it's probably just going to be more pit bulls on the docket. It's actually Pred tanks now being pumped out by Shock Treatment. He pulls back with his pit bulls, doesn't want to commit just yet, doesn't want to go in too hard and sacrifice all of his units or anything silly like that. Attack bike swinging in from the south, going to be trying to target down the Tib spikes, but actually these pit bulls, if they're able to get a good angle of attack, could swing in here and do some pretty good damage. You always have to be careful when you're engaging attack bikes because it's very easy to massively overkill bikes by, you know, right-clicking on just one single one, and then suddenly a lot of shots were wasted. Some pit bulls on the high ground going to be trying to get that extra angle of attack, that little bit of a flank, as both of the tip spikes do get cleaned up. Of course, they did pay for themselves, and quite a bit more for Shock Treatment. He certainly got back the initial investment that he north to try to flank and destroy these Scorpion tanks. It could open up a nice angle of opportunity for Luvaskot, but for now, Luvaskot is just throwing away Scorpion tanks with no real value for them. Pred tanks and rocket troopers are going to be able to clean through those units with absolute ease. And now there is no opportunity in the south that's completely open. The pit bulls are still there, and of course this gives more time for Shock Treatment to react, to send Predator tanks, rocket troopers, or what have you down south to help deal with this impending attack. And this APC engineer is going to be spotting at least the bike buggy. He may not know that there's necessarily the Scorpion tanks moving in as well. Not sure what the battle marker in the north was. That's a rifleman squad, but these Pred tanks starting to move on in south, and they've got a nice little tight group, which is going to be meeting up with these 2 Pred tanks to crush through any Scorpion tanks that still remain. In the very southern part of this map, you do indeed have the pit bulls holding the line, and that defense of the almost attack was exactly what Shock Treatment needed. Absolute ease holding that almost attack. And now he's going to be having himself a nice third Tib field in the middle. Moves in with some pit bulls. If he's able to strike down any harvesters, it'll probably be worth it. He's going to sacrifice out quite a few of these pit bulls. He's going to claim a couple of Scorpion tank lives, but of course the Scorpion tanks a fair bit hardier than the pit bulls, so they're mostly just heavily damaged. Not really too many deaths from those pit bulls. Bike buggy rolling in, gets the snipe on, I believe, 2 harvesters right there, as they were most likely stacked up a bit too much. A 3rd harvester going down, and a 4th will be eliminated in a couple of moments, as the bikes, one more salvo will kill it off. Pit bulls rolling up. They're a little bit too late. They're a little bit too day late and dollar short, as they say, to that particular party. And in comes Pred tanks and rocket troopers. Rocket dudes just firing those rounds, crushing through the infrastructure. Luvaskot trying to buy more and more time as he pulls back what few Scorpion tanks he has. Obelisks are going to be the defensive measure that he needs. With the obelisks, he might be able to just crush through this army. Kind of the problem is the fact that the rocket troopers are interspersed so nicely with the Predator tanks. The Scorpion tanks can't simply go for a crushing move to win the game. He's going to have to deal with the Pred tanks as well, which of course, Scorpion tanks, especially if just 1 or 2 are attacking at a time, not a good idea. Shock Treatment is going to get pushed back. He doesn't have the forces just yet to crush through all of the defenses. I'm not actually sure that these pit bulls in the south did very much. It looks like the harvester numbers are still pretty good for Luvaskot. Of course, for Shock Treatment, he can afford to lose a bit here and there. He does not need to win the game right this moment. The onus to make something happen is on Luvaskot. He's the one who's about to be out of Tiberium. He's the one who doesn't have any sort of economy in the middle of the map established. Shock Treatment, an experienced GDI player, or at least experienced with playing GDI versus Nod. He's like, hey, I know what time it is. Third base time means you probably got a Tib chemical plant. And I don't want 2 refineries going down to 1 single shot if I can help it. 1 single shot from the Tibcata missile, that is. Bread tanks pushing in from the north. These Scorpions need to get out of there, or else they will be caught and killed mercilessly by Shock Treatment. Luvaskot trying to switch it up into avatars. Not exactly crazy numbers of avatars just yet, but with double War Factory pumping out avatars, that number is going to grow very quickly. Scorpion tanks rolling on over, but if they end up getting caught, this is a pretty hefty number of Predator tanks, and the laser capacitors now actually finished up, so they are going to be able to contend better with these Predator tanks. I'm not actually sure if they'll be able to still stand a chance, as there's quite a few low HP Scorpion tanks, but the focus fire definitely could have been better from Shock Treatment. Probably still wouldn't have made a big difference in the overall scheme of things, but in this particular case, these Scorpion tanks will reign supreme. They will be able to push on forward. At the same time, Luvaskot needs to make sure that he's not pushing too far forward and that he's not wasting too many units. I don't know that that Tib Vapor Bomb was really worth it. He killed a couple of infantry squads, and he also killed off a barrack, so not exactly the value one-clicks that you would more likely be expecting. Avatar steps forward, gets himself shot in the face. This is a lot of militant squads. That's maybe more militant squads than I usually see late game in a Tib Wars match. As Luvaskot going to be stepping forward, but of course Juggernaut's going to be doing some pretty hefty damage to the clumped up militant squads. Not that those are really what you need to be worried about. It's more the rocket squads dealing with the avatars, and of course the avatars are starting to make it into the front lines. They're starting to target down those Juggernauts and eliminate them very quickly, but it's not necessarily going to be enough if these missile squads are not dealt with. This avatar going on a bit of a crushing rampage, but there's really just 1 avatar left, and after that, Watchtowers will clean up the rest very easily, as just militant squads, not exactly the base killing sort of force that you would hope in the late game of Nod v GDI. Scorpion tanks pushing it from one angle, this one lonely avatar pushing in from the other angle. A second buddy is going to be joining him on the front lines, but his friend may already be dead as Shock Treatment tears through wave after wave of reinforcements. These Scorpion tanks, if they're able to target down the MCV, if they're able to target down the economy or the production facilities, could end up making some pretty big headway. But for now, the front line is collapsing for Luvaskot with base defenses and that many rocket troopers. Shock Treatment doesn't need a whole lot to hold the ground, to hold his ground. Railgun Fred tanks being mixed in as well. 1 avatar being grabbed up by Shock Treatment. Might as well produce the engineer to grab that extra bit of firepower. Even the Scorpion tanks getting their just desserts. Ooh. It was a nice move by Luvaskot. You have to give him some sort of respect for trying. He made an attempt to expand out to the blue. That could have been some sort of saving grace type of move, some sort of ace in his sleeve. But if you can't refine it, it doesn't matter that you've got the infrastructure there. The refinery does survive, even though these 3 half-health Scorpion tanks would get actually killed off if those pit bulls stuck around to actually kill them off. There was really not a huge reason for Shock Treatment to pull back. He's still got 1 refinery on the front line. He could go ahead and drop down a second one if he really... No, he's got a second one right there. He could drop down more harvesters if he really wanted to. I mean, a third refinery and like 2 more harvesters would not be a bad idea either. Get himself up to that 7 and 3 harvester to refinery ratio, which definitely would be nice. Sell off one of these refineries, build an extra harvester, not a bad idea here. Of course, that's for like, you know, just future-proofing. I'm not sure that he needs to. It's not like he's got this game absolutely won, but Shock Treatment is certainly in the better position. And that's definitely been the story thus far. Luvaskot coming in here as the underdog. He needs to prove himself against the old school pro, to use that term a little bit loosely, of Shock Treatment. Not that anyone in Command & Conquer is actually doing this full-time for a living, but Shock Treatment, certainly one of the better Tibor players at this time. Luvaskot going to be able to harvest and refine maybe a little bit of blue Tiberium. Unfortunately, Railgun Predator tanks are pretty good at stopping that sort of thing from happening. When you've got 3 Scorpion tanks, you really have to hope that you're going to be fighting against, like, 1 Predator tank that's basically half dead. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very good time. Yeah, the Obelisk shows up at pretty much the last possible moment, but it's not necessarily going to be enough by itself. Luvaskot has been defeated. His large wall of units in the north that was moving forward, never actually reaching its goal with an epic battle. Instead, it will end up falling before it has a chance to see that fiery moment. Shock Treatment going up 2-0 against Luvaskot. It's going to be a hard road to till for Luvaskot. He's going to have to pull out the stops. He's down 0-2. He's still got an opportunity before he's up against that wall with the match point advantage going to Shock Treatment, but it needs to start now. The comeback needs to happen for Luvaskot. Can he make it happen in game number 3? Let's find out. Which takes us to Tournament Dust Bowl, and in the north, our orange GDI player. He is down 0-2 in this best-of-7 series. This is Luvaskot. He needs your cheers. He needs your support. While the man in the south, he's absolutely crushing through. This is Shock Treatment. Pink and Scrin, as you can probably tell. Foundry getting thrown down. That Foundry fast expand most likely. A lot of times this is sort of a base creep type build. Very macro heavy. We'll see if he decides to take it that way, though. He could decide to push a different way, try to do something a bit different with it. But in this particular case, he's probably going to be going for very macro-focused stuff. And again, it's on Luvaskot to make something happen. It's up to him to really bring the magic. Make it work against this guy named Shock Treatment. There's that 4th refinery going down over to that natural expansion. Able to secure that quite nicely. Engineer into the Tib Spike is indeed nice for Luvaskot. No denying that. It's not quite as good as having another Tib field under your control. As APC Engineer going to be moving out for Luvaskot. He's going to try to make some magic happen, but can he really do anything that's game-winning with them? That's what we're here to see. Second Tib Spike could be captured quite easily by Luvaskot, which would be a nice move. He would be able to get that extra income. 50 cred a second instead of 25 is certainly very nice. And if he's very fortunate and Shock Treatment isn't paying attention, he could grab something very important here. And of course, the drone ship is the absolute prize for that engineer. Rolling up just now, going to be showing up, and he's like, hello. There is a base defense queued. It could very well be a buzzer hive. Oh my word, he gets it! He gets it! Shock Treatment with a critical misstep there. Shock Treatment, wow, that was surprising. I thought he was gonna do something. Of course, the fortunate thing is that when you go for a Foundry Fast Expand, you still have a build queue. It's not as bad as if he, you know, just didn't have the Foundry. But still, that's such a nice cash boost for your opponent. And locking down that primary build queue is so very nice. That was just kind of a surprising move. Luvaskot has gained a nice advantage early on. I guess it would be an even bigger advantage if this natural expansion wasn't already up and running. So Luvaskot, if he waits too long, the advantage will definitely dwindle. There won't be much left of the fact that Shock Treatment lost that MCV and is most likely rebuilding it. I mean, it's already back up and running, so I'm not actually sure that the window of opportunity has been utilized, like, even at all. There's not a whole lot that Luvaskot could have done. Unfortunately, he wasn't himself necessarily going for a particularly aggressive build. He just kind of got fortunate with that. Slowed Shock Treatment down a bit, but I don't actually know that it slowed him down enough to be a big deal. Engineer's going to be moving out for shock treatment. He's already reclaimed one of the tib spikes. Another APC engineer. I mean, at some point, you have to kind of realize that most APC engineers aren't going to do anything, and that if you run them through a large group of your opponent's units, you can't really expect them to do anything, so it's kind of just like giving away free stuff to your opponent, which, I mean, giving gifts in real life is great. It's a very, you know, very good thing to do, generally. In video games where you're trying to win, generally not a good thing to do. This MCV could be a bit exposed, and okay, Luvaskot does indeed notice. He unpacks it right there in the face of shock treatment, so he will be able to do that. He doesn't have a crane, so losing his MCV would be a bit more devastating. Again, not necessarily a total game over sort of thing, but it is certainly a bigger deal. It will not be the case for now. Pred tanks showing up for the defense. Also, a lot of rifleman squads being brought over by Luvaskot. Shock treatment, not able to do that much just yet. He's just now getting his economy, or he's just now getting his production to the point where it's really underway, where it's really doing a lot. One Pred tank donated away by Luvaskot. Seeker tanks in the south potentially going to be moving in for a bit of a harass, as the MCV is going to be unpacking for that third base. The backup stasis chamber, always a good move that you see the top-end players make, is the double stasis chamber. You got to make sure that you can really get those stasis chambers so that you've got one to fool your opponent, and then the other one to be the real stasis chamber. I'm telling you guys, new meta incoming, but also incoming is this rocket trooper Pred tank army, which is going to be joining up, trying to deal with these avatars and the storm column, but right now they're just taking a bit of damage and not really doing all that much for it. Luvaskot deciding to defend his MCV because, once again, these Seeker tanks finding an open opportunity to move in and do some damage. Shock treatment not giving up on his tier 1 units, finding some use for them, finding some opportunity for them to actually do something against Luvaskot. Is he actually going to kill this MCV? That's actually... Oh, the lightning spike to stop the engineer. It's not even needed as the MCV gets sniped by just a large number of Seeker tanks. Even a Guardian cannon getting constructed, potentially a first for a competitive match. And now suddenly the entire army pulled out of position. Force field generators being researched as well. Shock treatment has an open avenue of attack in the north if he wants to move out to do some pretty serious damage through the middle of the map. This is a huge amount of GDI, but the third base is gone. The War Factory may have to be put to work reconstructing that MCV if Luvaskot wants to take that base for himself. He does have that one barrack, so a nice reinforcement point, at least for that. Shock troopers showing up on the front lines to try to help deal with this army, and that was a lot of units just firing at that one buzzer squad. Shock treatment actually going to be walking through this kind of narrow choke point, which will allow kind of one by one these units to be crushed. Shock treatment now going to be pulling back. This is a lot of DPS from our GDI player. Luvaskot going to be pressing forward and going to be able to snipe down probably at least 2 of these tripods. There's number 2 going down right there. Could pack along a couple of engineers as well if he wants to make extra use of those tripod husks. But after that, I'm not sure that the tripods will necessarily be enough to stop this army by themselves. What else is on the docket for shock treatment? He's only got about 5 tripods at least here. Potentially a couple more in the north. Devastator warships, if they're able to just get off a lot of shots, could definitely thin out the ranks. And Luvaskot's looking for an alternate angle. He's looking for another way to attack shock treatment and do some damage. Killing refineries down here, not the biggest of deals. These refineries are a bit more important overall in this stage of the game. Rifleman squad streaming in from the north, and shock treatment could very well be losing that Annihilator tripod if he's not careful. May end up getting targeted down. Those rocket squads just taking a lot of latent damage from the Annihilator tripods. They're not retreating, they're just kind of standing their ground in an awkward way. They're not standing together, and this is a bit of divide and conquering as the large pocket of rocket squads got killed off, and now it's just a couple of Pred tanks left against this sandwich of Annihilator tripods as they get absolutely devastated. Devastator Warship's going to be the nail in the coffin as training account has been defeated. Luvaskot dropping down 0-3, and Shock Treatment is in a position where he can all kill or clean sweep Luvaskot. Sh0ckTr34tment, can he make it happen? And game number 4 takes us to Small Town, USA. This man in the bottom left-hand corner, he is up 3-0. He is playing very well today, but can he close it out? Can he finish it up? This is Shock Treatment. Pink Scrin and the red Scrin in the top right-hand side. We do indeed have the man who needs your cheers. He's the underdog. He needs to mount a come-from-behind victory. This is Luvaskot. 4 games in a row is what he has to win. The reverse all kill, as it's sometimes known, and he has got to do it. Small Town USA kicking it off. 2 Tib spikes, which are very easy to secure. 50 cred a second for both players. That economic boost. How will these players use it? We shall see. For now, it's going to be a crane macro opening from Shock Treatment, a greedy opening, as if he continues this base creep, he may be just looking to get his econ up very, very quickly. Not a lot of scouting coming out from either one of these guys. A couple of buzzer squads running around the map. I'm not actually sure where Luvaskot, or if Luvaskot has any scouts. There we go. He does indeed have a buzzer squad. Usually you see at least the 1 buzzer squad for the scout. Sometimes more than that. But at least the 1, because you're typically selling off a couple of structures in the beginning anyways. And this is a lot of refineries being pushed out towards those expansions. I mean, you can take a look at the minimap and see that these 2 guys are very even in terms of their timings, and there's not a huge amount of difference here. As I say that, we actually are seeing the difference being War Factory into that refinery instead of just a refinery, as we're seeing down here. And both of these guys are like, all right, it's macro. We're playing eco. And in the macro games, Shock Treatment has been winning in the long run. It may have been a better idea for Luvaskot to bring a couple of practiced high aggro builds to this tournament, but you really need to be able to pull those off good, pull them off very well to make them work, especially in Tib Wars, where you've got the cheaper eco. It's not as easy to take those early game advantages and necessarily run with them all the time. This is the push out for Shock Treatment, though. He's going to be looking to do a bit of damage. He's got his first 5 of 6, no 7 Seeker tanks on the front lines. Of course, Descent's going to be brought in to deal with this. And Shock Treatment, he doesn't necessarily have to commit really hard to this. Luvaskot is going to be committing to the defense. He's going to be spending that money, pulling some of his harvesters off the line. And Shock Treatment, of course, doesn't want to make sure, or wants to make sure that he's not over-committing to this attack. He wants to make sure that he's not trading out too many Seeker tanks with his opponent. We also could end up seeing Mastermind play be utilized to try to shut down some of these expansions, some of these structures over here, as these guys have both base creeped to their quote-unquote naturals, their expansions. And Shock Treatment, he's continuing to push forward. Lots of Seeker tanks, a couple of Gunwalkers mixed in as well. And he's doing a good job of just focusing down his enemy units one at a time and keeping as many of his own Seeker tanks alive. And now we're in this situation where he may have already reached a critical mass. There's 2 photon cannons on the front lines doing that nice bit of DPS. There's also the lightning spike coming down for both players, activated just moments after each other. As what are you going to do when your name is Luvaskot and you've got this many Seeker tanks at your front door? One of the Warp Spheres is way down in the south. The other one's directly here on the front lines. The phase field being activated. And there is going to be the Tier 3 base defense. It's currently offline. He has to take the photon cannon down. And he's still keeping that portal, which it may be better just to sell off the portal, try to free up some extra electricity for both of his base defenses, as he does indeed need them to hold that front line. He's pushed back his opponent for now. Shock Treatment is getting pulled away. And for now, Luvaskot has survived. I'm not sure that he necessarily expended more credits in the defense than Shock Treatment expended in the offense, but it's most likely relatively even for both of these guys. Shock Treatment harvesting his primary field quite a bit more quickly than Luvaskot, so he's got that bit of an economic advantage. He's just harvested that extra bit of money, which he can pour into teching up. Wow. That rift generator is a bit quick, one could say. That might be the fastest rift generator I've seen in a competitive match. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it seems like it. Not a whole lot else is coming to my mind in terms of very fast rift generators. Looks like a mastermind was sniped quite nicely there by Luvaskot, so a nice read by him seeing that, but of course, once you build one mastermind, rebuilding it is not necessarily the biggest deal in the world. Shock Treatment apparently confident enough in this game that he's going to be able to be just fine, even though he dropped the credits on that rift generator, and of course has to wait still another 6 more minutes, even after the first minute has already elapsed. Locking down, it looks like 4 tripods right onto the front lines there, but now they're back into the fray, and there's not a whole lot here in terms of defense for Luvaskot. He can't really do that much against these tripods. Tripods getting turned around, force field generators kicking in just in time to potentially save a couple of these tripods. Not enough to save that tripod, but the others will escape for now. I'm also not sure what happened to that mastermind, which managed to escape with barely any HP left. There's a teleport forward for Shock Treatment. He was able to do that. His drone ship still is around, so he hasn't lost that to a mastermind. At least not just yet. No cap and cell sort of action for Luvaskot. Shock Treatment starting to push forward. And I really hope this isn't one of those games where he's just so confident and he's like, nah, I'm just going to chill for 5 minutes and wait for the rift generator to actually do something. Engineer on the front line, going to be bringing one of those tripods back from the dead. Shock Treatment playing this out very nicely. Slowly, bit by bit, the tripod numbers are certainly growing for Luvaskot, but he's down an upgrade. He does have the defenses. Mastermind teleports forward, gets annihilated, taken out, or one of the masterminds, I'm not actually sure, because there's actually the mastermind for Shock Treatment, so that one didn't actually teleport forward, but now Shock Treatment onto the front line, clearing the way. There's the cap and the cell. 1750 going to Shock Treatment as Luvaskot falling ever further down into the depths of this series. Focus fire on the tripods, eliminating one after another with still 4 or 5 tripods left remaining for Shock Treatment. Training account needs to level up. Luvaskot has been defeated, and that will do it for Shock Treatment. He has won the July 1v1 random-only tournament from GameReplays.org. A very well-played to Shock Treatment, and a well-played to Luvaskot as well, because Luvaskot killed it in those semifinals, playing very nicely until these finals, where he did indeed get that 4-0'd. And unfortunately for him, he will take a 2nd place to Shock Treatment. Very well played to him. Of course, a congratulations and a GG to both of our players. Shock Treatment taking home the 1st place prize very nicely, and that will do it for the July 1v1 random-only tournament. Thank you all very much for watching, both the live stream viewers on Twitch and anyone who is watching on YouTube when this eventually gets uploaded. And of course, this is Sybert, signing out.